We've been looking at the idea of attaining inside position and getting a grip. The first skills that we need in our step-by-step approach to going into the leg lock game. When you first start off with your training partners, you're going to find that getting inside position is very easy. Most people tend to naturally surrender it without thinking that there's any apparent danger. But as you climb through the skill ranks, you're going to have to start fighting for inside position. Pretty soon you're going to get a reputation as someone who likes to establish inside position and then go into the legs. And as a result, your opponent's going to do everything they can to stop you getting inside position. It's that point where things start getting interesting. What I want to do now is to look at the idea of working from outside position back into inside position. This is a skill you're going to have to master. Now, there's too many contingencies and variables to give you an absolute step-by-step procedure for this, but what I will do is show you some keynote themes that'll make the job a lot easier. What I recommend is that you start in outside positions and you force yourself to pommel your legs back into inside positions. Let's start off with some basic elements from closed guard. Closed guard is, of course, a quintessential example of outside control. In any situation where my legs are closed around my opponent, my legs are controlling him from outside. My legs are wrapped outside and around my opponent. So this would be the Jiu-Jitsu 101 version of outside control. Okay, this stands in contrast to butterfly guard, where both of my feet are in the inside position, and this would be the quintessential example of inside control. Okay, so how do I go from one to the other? Well, obviously during a match there's 1,000 things that could be happening at any given time, but let's look at some broad themes that'll make things a little bit easier for us. Okay, the first is the notion of angle. Okay, if I'm completely square to my training partner, it would take extraordinary flexibility for me to get my feet to the inside position. Okay, the other theme is the idea of one leg at a time. Even if I did have some kind of angle on my training partner, it's difficult for me to bring both feet at the same time into my opponent's legs. Moreover, not only is it difficult, it's risky. When I bring two legs back at the same time, I surrender knee position where my opponent can go into scoop grips, and now there's no Ashigurami game. Okay? So the first two themes that we want to touch on are the idea of gaining angle and one leg at a time. Whenever we have full outside control, two legs around our opponent, let's start with angle and then insert or pommel one leg at a time. Let's have a look at how this might happen. From a situation where I have an opponent, hands on biceps, like so. We're going to start off with a pushing upper body grip to maintain space, and from here we're going to look for angle. I'm going to take my two legs, flatten them out, and we're going to turn across our training partner like so. From here I'm going to take one foot and pommel it to an inside position on my training partner. Okay, I'm now in a position where I can plant my second foot, pommel out in the other direction, and bring my 2 feet in. Now, we've got a butterfly guard of sorts, but we're in a supine position, okay? Not quite as desirable as a seated position. So now we're going to go into a movement called the forward shift. Even if my opponent is in very, very tight to my body, a forward shift involves taking my feet and lifting my opponent's body off the mat so I can go from a supine position to a seated position. How do we do this? Well, first, I got to get under a center of gravity. So I bring my knees to my chest and bring his center of gravity closer to mine. Now, don't try to lift up to the ceiling. That's extremely difficult. Lift along the floor in a straight line. And as a result, we effortlessly go from a supine position to a seated position. Once again, starting off in a closed guard. The first thing we need is some form of angle. We can do that in numerous ways. We can post a foot on the floor. We can have two legs off the mat and pivot our hips like so. We come in one leg at a time, so that at no point do I surrender both of my legs to a potential scoop grip. Now we come out to a secondary angle and we insert the second leg. Even as my opponent comes forward and pushes weight over my body, look how I bring his body off the mat, and then we hit that simple forward shift to come up into a seated position. Now we have inside control with our feet, upper body grips, and we're in a position now to start that game that we saw earlier, taking our opponent's hands over our shoulders. From here, we can start to play the leg game. We're looking at the idea of working into inside position from an outside position. The two keynote themes we're starting with are the idea of pommeling one leg at a time and getting some form of angle to facilitate the pommeling process. It's very hard to pommel when we're squared up to our opponent. We just looked at a situation where from closed guard, our opponent was on two knees, we pommeled to an inside position. Now let's look at the situation where our opponent stands up in a closed guard. When my opponent goes to stand up, if I'm naive in the way I open my guard, I give him many good attacking options. If I simply open up my guard and my hips stay square, my opponent can easily go into any form of ashigarami he wants. In addition, he can throw my legs by with toriandos, or he can scoop grip my legs and start going into very good strong guard passing positions. So we need an effective strategy to get the inside position when our opponent goes to stand up. One thing I like to do is to start off with an outside grip on one side and an inside grip on the other. This makes it relatively simple for me to pivot off my training partner's hips, so that as I go to open up my guard, I take the inside position with my right knee. Placido's just going to move his arms, put them into an artificial scarecrow position. Watch my right knee. As I drop, my right knee takes the inside position. So immediately, there's no danger of any kind of leg lock activity on the part of my opponent. If he fell back for an ashigarami now, my hand position and my knee position would make it very ineffective. Now I pommel one foot to the inside position. That enables me to move my opponent's leg and get my opponent out of balance. I release and move the leg. That creates sufficient angle that now we can pommel directly into some form of inside position. Here I've chosen the X guard, one of our favorite methods of attaining inside position. And then from here we play the Kazushi game, we get his hands down to the mat, and now we're in perfect position to start entering into our training partner's legs. Once again, we have an opponent starting off with two knees. He rises into a standing position. From here, I take both inside and outside grips, never both inside. Okay? We open up and we form an angle so that I take the inside position where my right knee is inside his left knee. This gives us sufficient angle to pommel one leg first, and then from here, the second leg. Now, many good things we could do. One involves just off balancing my training partner, getting those hands down towards the mat, and from here there's so many different ways we can go in to attack the legs. We're looking at the idea of fighting for inside position with our legs, one of the great precursors to going into the ashigarami or leg lock game. One of the best ways that you can develop this skill is to start yourself in classical forms of outside position guards and force yourself to learn the skills of pommeling your legs back to the inside position. We've seen how we do it from variations of closed guard. We've seen those key themes are the idea of pommeling one leg at a time and the idea of gaining angle on our training partner. Now let's add to that a third element which greatly facilitates your ability to get to the inside position. This is Kazushi, or off balancing. Taking your opponent from a stable position to an out of balance situation where suddenly it becomes a lot easier for you to get your legs to the inside. I'm going to demonstrate this from one of the most popular forms of outside control based guards in the entire sport of Jiu-Jitsu, the Danaher guard. This is a time-honored and highly effective method of controlling your opponent from the outside. The most basic form of Danaher guards involve taking our foot and using our shoelaces to control the upper leg, our hamstring muscle to control the lower leg, and our hand to control even further down at the ankle. Okay, my second foot can be in a wide variety of different positions. Okay, we'll start with our foot on the inside position because our assumption is that our opponent in a submission grappling match is probably interested in leg locks. If I leave my foot in a vulnerable position out here, this might be very risky in a submission grappling context. So most of the time we'll have our foot here, like so. Okay, now this is obviously a leg controlling his leg from the outside. I'm interested in the idea of getting my foot to the inside position. So we're going to learn to switch our arm position where I punch through elbow deep and I relinquish my shoelace control of the hamstring and I give it up so that I can grab my own shin. Okay, so yes, I did lose control of my opponent's upper leg by dropping the foot, but I made up for it with a stronger control of the lower leg by holding onto my own shin just like so. Okay, now from here I'm going to create kazushi by off balancing my opponent over the right shoulder. I do this for a combination of my right foot and my leg lifting out in this direction to get my opponent's hands down to the mat. This makes it extremely easy for me to pommel my one foot through and around and switch up to a scoop grip, and as a result we can quickly convert into X guard. Once we get to X guard, it's a simple thing to keep our opponent's hands down and then make that preferred switch to a reverse X guard, where we can kick around the corner and control our training partner into a winning position. Once again, we start off with a classic form of outside control, the Danaher guard. From Danaher, we punch through with our hand, we drop our foot just low enough that we can come through and grab our own shin. From this form of Danaher guard, it's relatively simple for us to take our opponent's foot off the mat and off balance in this direction. Now, a simple action of pommeling a single leg brings the body into a position where we can control his balance. Any attempt to stand up on his part is easily combated with the X guard, and then from here we switch to reverse X, and now we're right back into the leg game. We can also perform this on the other side to show different angles. Once again, we start off just like so. From here, we come forward, making sure our hand punches through, grabs our own shin. I have to drop my shoelace to do that. Now I want to lift his foot off the floor and off balance over my right shoulder. Once I see his hands on the mat, the pommeling game becomes so much easier. It's harder for him to resist in any situation where he's simply looking to recover his balance. This gives me the time I need to pommel my foot through and establish another form of inside control, the X guard. Once we have X guard, we can keep the kazushi advantage, getting those hands down to the floor. Once they're down on the floor, we make a switch to a reverse X, and as a result, we can easily punch through and find ourselves in a strong attacking position. We're looking at the idea of pommeling to inside foot position. We're looking at some keynote themes because, in all honesty, there's so many contingencies that can occur during a leg pommeling situation that it would simply be impossible to cover all of them in an instructional series. What I want to do is to look at the main themes that will guide you as you work from here. We've seen that when we work from our back, the idea of angle is extremely important. If I get angle, the action of pommeling legs in is much easier. We've seen the idea of kazushi is very important. That if we can get our opponent out of balance, make him recover balance, in the time he goes to make his recovery, it's easy to pommel legs in. We've seen the idea of working one leg at a time. It's almost impossible to work both legs, and in some cases risky, to work both legs simultaneously to an inside position. Typically we work one leg first and then the other. Now let's look at the idea of pommeling to inside position when we're on top of people. If we have an opponent in bottom position, there are two main scenarios in which we work. Scenarios where my opponent is seated and scenarios where my opponent is in a supine position. We should be able to effectively pommel to an inside position in both cases. We'll deal with seated position first. If you just face in this direction, thank you. Okay, here's the problem. As I go to work with an opponent, typically they will have their feet fairly close together. Okay, if my opponent is naive and has his feet far apart, well, it's extremely easy for me to go into many forms of different attack. Okay, so typically what we see are people positioning their feet well and relatively close together, and from here it's a difficult thing for me to go in. Every time I go to step forward, I tend to give up inside position, and now my opponent can attack me in numerous kinds of ways. Okay, so we need to be able to approach our opponent effectively in a way that doesn't make us vulnerable, and at the same time hopefully gain some kind of inside position. Let's talk about the idea of approaching an opponent in a fashion that doesn't render us vulnerable. The thing I must avoid here is square stances, where I come up to my opponent's foot line and surrender the inside position completely. Let's create some demarcation lines that will make our task a little easier. Here's our opponent's toe line. That's the line that joins my training partner's big toes. Here's the ankle line, the line that joins his two ankles. Here's his knee line, which joins his two knees, and here's his hip line, the line that joins his two hips, which is the ultimate line that I have to pass if I'm interested in passing my opponent. Okay? When I come up to my opponent, I initially step up to the toe line, like so. If I go beyond the toe line, I'm surrendering inside position to my opponent. Never a good thing in a leg lock exchange. So when I first go in towards my opponent, I step up to the toe line. Now, in order for my opponent to get inside position, he's going to either have to extend his leg, which makes him vulnerable in some ways, or he's going to have to move his body weight forward. And that takes time. Okay? Go back. This will greatly facilitate my ability to control the dynamic of the situation. So, as I move in, I take a staggered stance, 1 foot forward, 1 foot back. If I stand square, I'm very vulnerable to attack on both legs. So I put 1 foot forward up to my training partner's toe line like so. Now from here, I'm going to use my rear hand as a post hand, like this, on my training partner. So that if he would try to move towards me, there would be some resistance there. Okay? I can't just enable him to move as he wills. So we use our post hand like so. My lead hand becomes like a down blocking hand, whereas my opponent goes to move in and catch me with a foot, I can always lift the foot out. If he goes to grip me with a hand, I can always fight his hands like so. So at no point do I give him the ability to grip me with both of his hands and hook me with his feet at the same time. This would be too much advantage to the bottom man. Now, at some point, I want to take inside position. So, once I step up to the toe line, I post on my training partner. I know that if I step in with this leg, it's to his advantage to grip that leg and start to work. It's also to his advantage to get his foot inside mine and work like so. Okay? So what I'm going to do, having stepped up to the toe line and put on my thumb post, is I'm going to grip, cross grip at the wrist. So his ability to grab me with that outside hand is now taken away. If he denies me that hand, my second choice is to grab this one. So if he pulls away on this side, I'll take this. This is good, this is even better. Now I step into the inside space. I step right over his ankles and I aggressively go forward and I push his shoulders behind his hips so that the stance that he works with is slightly broken. As he goes to recover the stance, now I have the inside position and we're in a position to start playing either a passing game or go into a leg game. Let's show that on the other side. Again, I want to approach my opponent in a way that doesn't make me vulnerable. First, there's a distance game. If I see him aggressively coming towards me, I may well play a distance game out here, never allowing him just to come forward and get into my legs. Okay? So there's going to be some jockeying for position in this early phase. Once I've established a target that I can go to attack, I step up to the line of my training partner's toes. My body is relatively low. If I stand too tall here, it's easy for him to get in underneath me and get to the legs. So I use my head as a measuring stick. My head is roughly the same height as my training partner's head. From here, I use my rear hand as a post hand. And I start to tie up my training partner's hands on the side, preferably, that I'm going to step in with. Now, I step in quickly and push to break the structure of his stance. As he goes to recover his stance, there's many ways that we'll be looking at later today on how to go into our training partner's legs from a position like this. The main thing is that we've gone in and we've established the inside position with at least 1 foot. We're looking at the idea of gaining inside position from top when we have a seated opponent. We just looked at a method where we went up step by step and established inside position. That step-by-step method works extremely well when you're first entering into the leg lock game. But as you go higher against more skilled opponents, you're going to have to start substituting it for a movement-based method. Okay? Ultimately, what's going to get you inside position when you have an opponent in a seated position working against you is going to be your ability to generate movement. Again, there are too many contingencies for me to show you everything that would be required to gain inside position, but I can show you certain keynote themes that will make your task a lot easier. Okay? As you go with better and better opponents, they're going to become more and more disciplined with their ability and their mental toughness to keep that inside position. As you go with beginners, typically you find even a small amount of movement, they lose track of where their feet are relative to yours, and the inside position comes pretty quickly. That all starts to change when you go against good people. Now they will work with their feet very close to their own body and constantly work in inside position like so. So that any step I take forward gives them inside position. Okay, doesn't matter what I do, they've always got the inside. Why? Because their feet are so close together and so close to their own body that if we just face this way, I literally do not even have the space to put a foot inside. There just isn't space. Okay? In situations like this, the path to the inside position is through movement. Okay? What do I mean by this? When I see my opponent has contracted his body inwards like this, I start to understand that he's sacrificed his base of support in order to do this. Okay? He's sacrificed mobility by taking an artificially strong inside position. Whenever I see someone playing this kind of game, I start off with movement. The first form of movement we're going to look at is fake movement. Okay? Standing in front of my training partner like so, I'm going to straighten up a little bit. Why? Because when I'm too crouched over, my own movement gets constrained by my crouched stance. So now I need to stand more upright with my training partner. I'm going to be staggered and I'm going to be a little bit further away. From here, as I post on my training partner, my first step is going to be a cross step, where I post on my training partner and I take a side step out beyond the line of his knee. Okay? Off that initial step, now I crescent step all the way around my training partner like so. He has to react to this. He has to start pushing, posting, and scooting. And as he scoots, the feet separate, and I've got the inside position that I'm looking for. Okay? So I created a fake pass in order to generate movement on his part that separated his feet and gave me the opportunity for the inside position. Let's have a look at this again. I start here with my training partner, I post, and as I post, I sidestep out. I take my crescent step that goes in a wide crescent around his leg and points my foot inwards. If he doesn't move, he gives me the back. So he has to move. When he does so, the feet open. That's exactly what I'm looking for. And then from here, we've got inside position and potential attacks. So that's our first form of movement. Let's go further into this. Now, my opponent's afraid of the crescent step. So we start faking crescent steps. I sidestep and I put my leg around the corner and I see his movement. Okay? As he goes to follow me with his right leg, that gives me space to enter with my right. And as a result, we have inside position with one foot, we can follow with the other, or what have you. The main thing is, we've got a foot inside. Once again, I sidestep. Off the sidestep, I fake, switch, and go back in. Okay? So we've got two forms of movement here. The first one involved a clean crescent step all the way around. As he goes to follow us, we took inside position. Now we're faking the crescent step, he goes to follow, and we step in and we take inside position. Those are two examples of movement. Let's go further now. This time we go in on our training partner, we post, play with the hands, etc. From here my two hands come down and I catch. One like so, one like so. Okay? Now I catch and I drop. As my opponent goes to recover position, my feet take the inside and we're ready to play. Once again, from a position where we're posting with our training partner like so, we go in, catch, feet go inside, and now when he recovers, we've got the inside position and we're ready to play. Now, from down on the knees, from a position like so, we're playing the push-pull dynamic in here. Off that push-pull dynamic, I start to rise. If I'm sitting on my heels, it's hard for me to move, and it's very easy for him to start pushing me backwards. So we're up on our heels like so. From this initial push-pull dynamic, I'm going to put a hand on the collar and a hand on the knee. And as a result, we can separate the legs. From here, I put my foot up on the inside, he goes to recover position, and we've got the inside position that we're looking for. Other clean examples from here. I take a hand, I put it here underneath my training partner's calf muscle on either side. As a result, I can easily brush my training partner's two knees to the side. As he goes to recover position, my knee goes inside, and we've got the inside position that we're looking for. These are all common sense examples of how we get inside position. Ultimately, we're looking to generate movement through push-pull dynamics. As my opponent works from here, we start that push-pull. And then we have the inside position. I'll say this again. As your opponent improves in skill level, you won't just be able to step to inside position. You're going to have to move yourself or him to generate the conditions which separate his body especially at the feet, and give you the inside position. It'll be a battle you win rather than something you merely take. We're looking at the idea of winning the battle for inside position with our feet. So far, we've looked at top position, where our opponent was in a seated situation. A lot of your opponents are going to go down to their back into a supine position, and you're going to have to be effective there too. The game's a little different, but most of the themes that we worked on are still there. Let's look at a situation where Placido is in a supine guard, and let's clearly identify what we want and what we don't want. Okay? What we don't want in any leg lock exchange is a situation where his 2 feet are inside my legs. Okay? This is an easy win for him in terms of leg locks. Okay? There's other things we can do here, but in the Ashigarami game, this is very good for him and very poor for me. Okay? The best situation for me, at least as far as the Ashigarami game goes, is for me to have both my legs inside my opponent's legs. So I have inside position with both of my legs. Next best is a situation where I have one leg inside my opponent's legs, like so. Okay, this is pretty safe from his attacks, and there's some very good offense that I can do from here myself. The other great option is a situation where none of us has inside control. He doesn't have it, and I don't have it. Okay, it looks like it's completely equivalent here. The truth is that who gets the leg locks, the Ashigarami in this position will come down to skill level, because essentially it's neutral. Okay, I'm not inside him and he's not inside me, but a simple set of movements from this kind of position will give me inside position in a heartbeat. Okay, where I can throw legs in. Okay, we'll be looking more at that later. So let's rank where we can and can't be. First, the situation we don't want to be in. He has complete ownership of the inside position. I have nothing, he's got everything, both legs. Okay? The most desirable, from my perspective, is me, 2 inside. Then 1 inside. And then neither one of us anything inside. Okay? So what we're going to do as a learning drill for you guys is to start off in the worst possible position. I'm going to have Placido change his angle so that he's facing this way. Now, let's understand something about the nature of his hooks. Placido is highly skilled in leg locking, and he's doing the right thing. He's retracting his toes towards his own knee to make what we call a sticky hook. If Placido was naive and he just had his foot dangling loosely behind my leg, this would be no challenge at all. He can be post on the leg and take it out. Okay? But he's a good man, and he is effectively hooked with that sticky foot behind my knee, so that when I try to pull out now, it feels it's not going to happen. And if he extends his leg, he'll take me completely out of balance. He'll start to generate kazushi. Okay? So how do we get out from someone who knows what they're doing in this situation? Well, there's a technique to it, as there always is. We're going to start by posting on our training partner's knees. Let's understand what's required for him to hold and control me. He needs to make my knees point outwards away from each other. When he does that, even a small movement with either leg, just a small movement with either leg will knock me out of balance. Okay? Now, what we're going to do to negate this is to turn one leg at a time, that same thing that we saw earlier, never 2 legs at the same time, always 1 knee at a time, inwards. And that removes the sticky hook. Here, the hook is set. I can't pull out. Once I post and turn, now the hook is negated. I put 2 hands on the knee and I put all my weight over the other leg. So we learn to pommel, as we saw earlier, 1 leg at a time. I pommel my foot over to the inside position. Now we have a situation where I have a leg inside and he has a leg inside. Now, we wanted both legs inside, remember? So I post, I turn my second knee in, I put my weight onto the opposite leg, I pick my foot up to my buttocks, and I pommel my legs to the inside position. Now, because I have both my legs inside, it's an easy thing for me to start going into the various forms of leg lock from this position. Once again, our first pommeling drill. My training partner comes in and establishes 2 sticky hooks. He's owning all the inside position. So we post, turn, double post, and I pommel 1 leg at a time. I do the same trick on the other side. I pick my foot up to my buttocks, pommel in. Now, the space between his knees is dominated by me. And as a result, any form of leg lock entry that we want is available to us. That's our first pommeling drill. Let's go on from there. This time, he starts everything inside. He's owning the inside real estate. We saw that we can post, turn the knee in, put the weight on the second foot, and pommel to inside position. Okay. Once we get one leg inside, it's not so difficult for us to start an action of back stepping. Right, pull the second leg out, post, and now we can back step over our training partner's legs and go into a potentially winning position. So if we have one leg inside, we can use back step entries to go into the legs. Here I have no legs inside. Turn, pommel one leg in, free the leg, and now a simple back step action gives us the cross Ashigurami position. A third drill, again, we start with our opponent dominating the inside position. We know that if we come through and pommel, we now have one leg inside. My opponent hooks on this leg. I bring my leg up knee to knee, turn my knee inwards, pommel the second leg over. Now where do we find ourselves? Neutral. Both legs. I don't have any inside control. He doesn't have any inside control. No problem. I sink my knee, capture my training partner's leg, and as a result, we can quickly sit into a position where we can go into our training partner's legs. Once again, we start off, angle, one leg at a time. He hooks in, from here, angle, one leg at a time. Now we're in the perfect position to go on the attack. So many ways from here where we can go directly into our training partner's legs. Those are a simple set of drills that we can use to build the skills required to get inside position on a supine opponent. We're looking at the idea that if we're going to play experts in the leg lock game, we have to be able to pommel our legs to advantageous inside position. In the previous sequence, we worked with a supine opponent, and we saw when he hooks into our legs, we need specific methods of turning to break his connection, stepping a foot to a foot, and from here we're able to pommel to an inside position. We can either stay with one leg inside, we can pommel the second leg in, we can pommel to outside, and we saw a range of ways to pommel the legs effectively on that supine opponent. Okay. Now, there's going to be times you're down on the knees and your opponent gets the beat on you. His feet are in the inside position, and from a seated position he pulls you in and starts elevating you. So, I'm working in like so, and let's say for example my opponent gets a double underhooks, and from here he starts elevating me up into the air. Okay. Once we get into a position like this, I got good news and bad news. The bad news is your knees are off the ground. That means if you don't guard what you're doing, it's very easy for him to go into Ashigurami variations, and from here you can quickly get in trouble. Okay. The good news is your weight's on your hands. Okay, and that means my legs are very, very light. We can take advantage of this and start using pommeling actions to protect ourselves. First things first, when we're in this position, I'm going to recommend you always take your feet back in towards each other and towards your buttocks. The further my feet are from each other and away from my buttocks, the easier it is for him to start pulling legs and going into variations of Ashigurami. So our first thing from here is always to retract the legs back towards each other and back towards our buttocks. Now I can move my legs in ways where I can begin pommeling. Watch my left foot. In this case, I'm going to take the inside position by turning my body and pommeling my left foot inside his foot. Just separate your feet a little. I take my left foot and I pommel my left foot inside his right foot. Now I can put this foot safely on the floor, extend my left leg, and what do I find myself with? Inside position on one side. Okay. Now as my opponent goes to work and elevate me, I have the inside position. It's much harder for him to work successfully. Now as he locks his foot into my hips, like so, we get an ability to pommel our second foot through as a hook, like so. Now he tries to hold his inside position, finds he can no longer do so, and now I have 2 feet in the inside position. And now, if I wanted to, from here, I can go on the attack. I can sit back into legs, I can spin around legs, etc., etc. Okay? Let's have a look at that sequence again, facing in this direction, so you can see the footwork. From a seated position, my opponent goes through and takes double underhooks. As he lifts and elevates me up into the air, from here I make sure I keep my feet in a relatively safe position by taking them back towards my own buttocks. Now from here I start an action of pommeling. I turn my foot and I hook my foot inside his shoelaces. So I stole in some degree of inside position. Now as I extend my leg, I take inside position on one side. As my opponent tries to elevate me on the other, look how I take my foot, I bring it back to my buttocks, and I hook the inside position on the other side. Now when I extend my leg, both of my legs are in the inside position. And as a result, it's not a difficult thing for me to start playing the leg lock game. Once again, once we get elevated in positions like this, first, safety. Bring your feet back into a relatively safe position, close together and close to your buttocks. Now, start playing the pommeling game. If I have to turn my body to achieve angles, that's fine. I bring my body weight forward and I score inside foot position. If my opponent attempted ashigarami with his left leg, he'll just give me what I wanted. Makes no sense now because I stole the inside position from him. Now I bring my second foot over, pommel. When he tries an ashigarami on that side, same thing. He just gives me the inside position. And from here I can either engage in passing, or if I'm interested in the leg game, we can go around the corner and attack legs. Essentially what happened is our opponent started with inside position. We stole it to him while being suspended. We stole it from him while being suspended in midair. And as a result, we were able to turn his possible leg lock entry into our own. As you grow in sophistication, you're going to realize you can do more than just pommel with your feet. You can start to pommel with your knees also. As I get elevated, I can take one of my knees, in this case I'll choose my right knee, the one furthest from the camera, and I'll start an action of turning across my opponent's body. That turn creates considerable space for my legs to start a pommeling action where I might go across two shoelaces at the same time. As a result, I can extend away from my training partner and expose legs in very different forms of position, where we can go in other ways to cross ashigarami, for example. By utilizing a safety first principle, my feet close to my buttocks, my feet close together, I do a good job of shutting down the initial danger. Then it becomes a fascinating exercise in maintaining my body weight on my hands, which makes my legs very light. Once my feet and legs become light, I use a combination of hip movement, knee pressure, and foot pommeling to regain the inside position from what could have been a very hazardous situation and go back into the leg lock game or passing game. Once again, first things first, I lose the battle for grips and I get elevated. Immediately, feet close together and feet close to buttocks. From here, I try to pommel inside, separate your feet. From here, if I get a single foot inside, I extend and I have one foot inside. When he tries to continue his elevation, it's difficult now. One foot isn't enough. Now we can play all kinds of games. I could, for example, punch in an underhook and bring my knee across and go into passing. I could, for example, give him the underhook, elevate, back step, and go back into the legs. All these possibilities flow out of this simple idea of consistently looking to use the fact that as our weight goes onto our hands, our legs become very light and very mobile and easy to pommel. Your goal is always the same, to use your knees to clear your opponent's knees from side to side, and to use your feet to pommel your shoelaces to a position inside his shoelaces. If you can do these things, you'll do a good job of moving away from what would ordinarily be a very dangerous situation and creating attacking possibilities of your own. We're looking now at the second great skill of heel hooking and the Ashigurami game in general. This is the skill of distance and connection. So we started off with the idea of grip and inside position. Now we're shifting to the second fundamental or essential skill of the Ashigurami game, distance and connection. The first topic that I want to look at is the idea of what is the primary mechanism of connection to your opponent. What connects my legs and hips to his legs and hips and makes the whole leg lock game possible. The most important form of connection that you're going to use throughout your leg locking career is what we call the standard or Arimi Ashigurami. Arimi means to enter, to go through and into. This is the form of Ashigurami that we use to lock onto our opponent's legs on first contact and form to cover distance and form an initial connection to our opponent's legs and hips. Just as if you started the sport of boxing, your first goal would be to develop a powerful jab, understanding that the jab is the primary punch in all of boxing and almost all of the other punches come off the jab. So too in the leg locking game, the Arimi or standard Ashigurami functions in a similar fashion. It's the jab of the leg lock game. It's the Ashigurami you'll use more than any other. It's the Ashigurami you'll use to set up all the other many varieties of Ashigurami. You must become proficient in its use, and you must have a solid understanding of what you're trying to do when you lock into an Arimi or standard Ashigurami. Let's have a look at what we mean when we talk about Arimi or standard Ashigurami. All Ashiguramis, or almost all, have one thing in common. The idea of two of my legs controlling one of my opponent's legs. Okay. If you were to go on YouTube and put in Ashigurami or heel hook or something, you'll probably see something like this. Most people use a shoelace underneath the leg they're trying to control and a second leg controlling their opponent's leg here at the hip. Okay. Let's make a strong distinction between two positions for my inside leg. Let's also make a distinction between what we call the inside leg and the outside leg. Okay. My inside leg can be positioned in two very good positions. One is on the same leg that I'm trying to control. This is the so-called cross buttock position, where my left shoelace goes to my opponent's left buttock. Okay. This has a set of uses which we'll be looking at throughout the instructional series. The alternative is a straight buttock position, where my left shoelace goes to my opponent's right buttock. This too has its own uses, and we'll be seeing more of this position as the instructional goes on. I'm just going to shift our body position so you can see that from the other angle. Again, starting off with a basic Arimi Ashigurami. Okay, I have two choices here with regards the positioning of the shoelaces of my inside foot. We're distinguishing here between an inside leg and an outside leg. When it comes to positioning the foot of my inside leg, I have the choice between going here to the cross buttock position, where my left foot goes to my opponent's left buttock, goes across the center line, and here the straight buttock position, where my left foot goes to the right buttock. Okay. When it comes time to form an initial connection to my opponent in the Arimi Ashigurami, most of the time I prefer to work with my foot here in the straight buttock position. Why? What's so important about this? When I take the foot of my outside leg, my foot points outwards like so. I want to create a connection between my two legs. The further my legs are apart, the easier it is for my opponent to break the connection and start forcing his way out of their Ashigurami. So what I want to do is put my foot here in the straight buttock position so that my knee and ankle can easily lock over each other and form a strong initial connection. If I place my foot in the cross buttock position, I cannot make a satisfactory connection. There's a gap between my outside foot and my inside leg. My opponent can exploit that gap by easily separating the feet and then going into any kind of defensive maneuver that he likes. Okay, so as a general rule, when I work here with both of us in a seated position, I prefer this straight buttock position. We'll see later today that there are other times when I prefer the cross buttock position, typically when I'm looking to elevate my opponent from bottom. Once again, changing our position. We understand now we have an outside leg and we have an inside leg. How these two legs work in unison is the key element to understanding how this ashigarami works powerfully against an opponent to control them. We know that the foot of the outside leg starts here on the hip and exerts a downward force on our training partner's hip, essentially pinning the hip. It gets reinforced by the inside leg, and the two overlap so that a circle is closed around my opponent's hip. The only way I can do this is by putting my shoelaces in the straight buttock position on the opposite leg. Now a satisfactory connection is made, and as a result, when my opponent goes to move my legs around, it's very, very difficult for him to get away from me. It's even more difficult for him to actually break the structure of the ashigarami. However, if I put my feet in the cross buttock position, cross buttock is useful in other contexts that we'll look at later today. However, from this position, it's easy for him to take advantage of the gap between my inside and outside legs and start fighting my ashigarami and breaking the contact. You must become proficient in the use of controlling your opponent through this Arimi ashigarami or standard ashigarami long enough that you can move to other varieties of ashigarami, which will ultimately result in you attacking your opponent's leg with success. Let's talk also about the idea of squeezing legs versus scissoring legs. We know that we have an outside leg and an inside leg. A common misunderstanding here is that people believe the keynote to control in the ashigarami position is to squeeze your thighs together. Whenever I just go to squeeze my legs, this rapidly leads to fatigue in the inner thigh muscles. The inner thigh muscles are notoriously weak. I don't want to squeeze my legs, I want to scissor them. Picture the difference between riding a bicycle, which I can do for long periods of time and with great strength. I can carry my body up hills, etc., etc. I can sprint on a bicycle, all of these things, because the scissoring effect in the human leg is extremely strong. However, if you ask me to squeeze legs together, the small, weak inner thigh muscles rapidly become tired. You can see this in many everyday contexts. You can take even a weak person, put them on a leg press, and they can push significant amounts of weight. However, if you take that same person and make them squeeze inwards on a rubber ball, they'll quickly become tired. Again, squeezing the leg muscles is not only physically weak, it leads to fatigue. Whenever possible, we want to substitute scissoring actions over squeezing actions. Ashigarami is a good example of this. When I lock up the Arimi ashigarami, my right leg pushes over my training partner's leg, while this one here scissors back in the opposite direction. So there's a scissor going across the top of my training partner's hips in opposing directions. I'm not squeezing my knees together so much as I'm pulling my foot across and then pushing the other one across so that my legs scissor. Now I put body weight over my training partner's shin when he goes to move away. I'm well locked to my opponent's body. We're looking at the second essential skill of the ashigarami game. This is the notion of distance and connection. Remember that even though distance and connection are two distinct skills, in actual combat and in competition, you'll be using them side by side with each other. So I've always found the best way to approach them is to teach them as a unified skill. You can't really use one without using the other. There is a measure of distance so important to the leg locking game that we're going to spend separate time just looking at this one issue. If there's one thing that's going to throw you off and cause problems for you when you first immerse yourself in the leg lock game out of ashigarami, it's going to be the notion of distance. There is a fundamental measure of distance that you must understand and that you must work with every single time you get into ashigarami positions and fight for leg locks. This is the measure of knee and knee line. When I go to control my opponent with ashigarami, ultimately I'm looking to control the real estate between his hip and his knee. But ultimately, with the heel hooks in particular that we're going to be looking at, we're attacking our opponent's knee. Let's contrast my opponent's knee with my knee line. The knee line is the straight line that joins my two knees together. At all times, when I play the heel hook game, I want my opponent's knee inside my knee line. If my opponent shifts his weight back a little, you can clearly see that right now he's on the border of my knee line. As a result, if I try any form of ashigarami from this position, the knee is not trapped sufficiently. And as a result, I have what can only be described as a weak and feeble looking ashigarami. If I attempted any kind of heel hook from here, the results would be reflectively weak and feeble. It is absolutely critical that I maintain my opponent's knee well within my knee line. The further inside, the better. Here's a piece of wisdom for you. Always work with the principle of overkill. When I first enter into my opponent's legs, I get my hips as close as I can to my opponent's. You can never, as it were, get too close. Hip to hip is best of all. Why? Because as you go to engage in a resisting opponent, and they know the various paths out of these locks, inevitably, as you fight for the leg lock, your hips are going to drift apart. If I start on the border of the knee line, if he drifts apart even a few inches, that will destroy the integrity of my heel hooks. If I start so close to him that even if he moves a significant distance, he's still well within my knee line, that's what I'm looking for. So when I first enter and connect with my training partner, you will constantly see both myself and my students adjusting their hips in. If he ever goes to move away from me and I lose even a small amount of the knee versus knee line battle, I will stop whatever I'm doing, reattach, and move back in. I will not, as my opponent moves away, pursue a heel hook when there is a lack of integrity between knee and knee line. Again, I will stop whatever I'm doing, adjust my position, and only then will I go back into the heel hook itself. Knee and knee line first, everything else second. It's that simple. Now, there's a simple visual cue here. There's the knee line, there's my opponent's knee, and at the same time, watch my foot on the inside leg. We prefer the straight straight buttock position. Why? When I go cross buttock, it actually prevents me from getting very close to my opponent. The structure of my own left leg prevents me getting close. That's another reason why I favor straight buttock position in this particular case. It makes it easier for me to get the critical hip to hip contact. Now, when I lock up in this position, I put everything over the top of my opponent's leg. He's well within my knee line. When he goes to pull away from me now, it will be very, very difficult indeed. And even as he's moving, I'm keeping the integrity of his knee well inside my knee line. As a result, from here, it's going to be relatively easy for me to go into the heel hook game. It's a very useful thing to have a small set of drills which you can perform on a daily basis to take some of these concepts and theories that we've been talking about and actually put them into practice. We've looked at the idea of distance and connection. We've seen the fundamental measure of distance as the relationship between my opponent's knee and my knee line. I always want his knee well within my knee line. I want to be as much hip to hip with my opponent as possible. We want to use the principle of overkill, of always moving so far in towards our opponent's hips that even if we should drift apart as we perform the move against resistance, he'll still be well within your knee line. Now, let's look at a drill which does exactly this. We're going to start with a training partner in a seated position, just like so. And we're going to have the inside position, our two knees inside our training partner's two knees. From here, we're going to take a 2-on-1 leg grip. We're going to practice the skill of scooting our buttocks hip to hip towards our opponent. It's very important that we don't put our hands on the floor when we perform this drill. If I take my hands off the 2-on-1, there's no reason why my opponent can't pommel his leg to the inside position, and now he can threaten me. Okay? So once I get the 2-on-1 position, I can't relinquish it. That means that my feet are going to have to draw me towards my opponent. Okay? So we're going to establish the 2-on-1, and my 2 feet will pull my body in just far enough that from here I can kick through and then establish inside position along with a movement inwards that gives me a nice tight Arimi Ashigarami. We've seen the idea of a straight buttock foot position. Now we take our elbow over our training partner's ankle and we lean forward with our ankle and knee well connected. As a result, there's a tremendous connection to our opponent's leg. And now we're going to test that connection with the drill. My training partner is going to walk backwards on his hands. With no hands, you can see that I can hold my position just fine. Now we're going to test it with a roll. Placido is going to roll in this direction with no hands. We see that we're still connected to our training partner. Now he's going to connect it in a linear fashion, linear. And we see the connection is still very good. Now he's going to test it with a roll in the opposite direction. And we see that we're still connected. Now he's going to go back to a linear test. And with no hands, we're still well connected to our opponent. When you can perform this simple drill, you know that it's your legs connecting your opponent, yourself to your opponent's legs. All too often, people make their primary connection with the hand, and they rely on the arms to do the work. That's going to make it very difficult for you as we progress further down our skill set to make transitions to a heel hook grip. If all of my pressure comes from this arm grip, then it becomes very risky for me to transition to a winning heel hook grip. What I want is to let my legs do the work through that scissoring action and a closed set of wedges around my opponent's hips. When there's closure between my knee and my ankle, the connection is strong. I started strong by constantly scooting my hips towards my opponent's hips and then closing up and putting body weight over the top. This was tested by the drill where we saw linear movement and then rotational movement, and at no point did I use my hands. Only my legs connected me to my opponent. This is the acid test as to whether or not you're making a satisfactory connection leg to leg with your opponent. You're going to need that later on so that you have mobile hands and you can switch from grip to grip with your upper body while your lower body maintains the connection you need with the Arimi Ashigarami. We're looking at the broad subject, the second essential skill of the heel hooking and Ashigarami game, the idea of distance and connection. Now, we're looking at a series of simple drills which take the theoretical knowledge we've talked about and enable you to transfer that into practice. One of the most important drills that we need to go over concerns exactly the idea of distance. Okay, we're going to have a training partner who's in a standing position in front of us. They're going to stand in an artificial square position, feet apart, just like so, and they're going to have their hands away from their hips, like so. Okay, let's understand something about distance here. When I want to go into my opponent's legs, there are certain lines of demarcation that I have to cross if I'm to effectively enter into my opponent's legs. When someone stands over me, that line of demarcation is the ankle line, the line that joins my training partner's two ankles. Okay? We know that ultimately the measure of success or failure when it comes to distance in the Ashigarami game is the relationship between my training partner's knee and my knee line. So often in competition, you'll see people fail to penetrate sufficiently and come up with very weak looking Ashigaramis. Okay? My measure when someone is standing is the ankle line. If I fail to pass that line, this happens. I get contact with my training partner, I pull myself to some degree and come up short. And as a result, when I try to come around for the Ashigarami, you get a feeble looking Ashigarami. You have to pull your body around, the legs come up into a poor position, and there's simply no control over your training partner's legs. It is absolutely critical that when we penetrate, our hips must go to his hips. Now, he's standing vertically, okay? That means his hips are directly over his ankles. If I'm to get to his hips, that means my hips have to pass his ankle line so I can get hip to hip on my opponent and bring his knee well within my knee line. The basic idea is that when someone is standing over us, my hips must penetrate past his ankle line. How are we going to do that? A simple drill, which I often have my students do on a daily basis, involves getting a double leg position, just like so. When I make the position, don't think it's your hands pulling your body in like you're rowing your way into position. That's not the idea. My hands prevent him from stepping backwards. That's all they do. What brings me forward is the action of my feet pulling my body inwards. When I combine the pull of the hands and the pull of the feet, with most of the work being done by the pull of the feet, my hips are going to penetrate past his ankle line. Okay? We need a good starting position right there. Make sure you don't grab superficially with the fingers. You want to come in wrist deep and snake your wrists around your training partner's calf muscles. You also want to round out your body. I want to minimize the amount of surface area of my body sliding along the mat. The more surface area of my body on the mat, the more drag there will be, and the harder it will be for me to work my way into and penetrate sufficiently to get to the Ashigarami. So, starting off with a rounded body to minimize contact with the mat, I go in and I make my initial contact. Off that initial contact, my 2 feet pull my body through so that my hips go well past my training partner's ankle line. This means that when I throw my legs to the Ashigarami position, we come up and make clean contact. Okay? My knees are well above my opponent's knees, so we know the knee relationship has been satisfied. In addition, I'm not using my hands. Only my legs are holding me in place, so it's my legs doing the work. Because I have free hands, I can use that to go into the various grips that are going to be required when it's time to actually heel hook a live opponent. Let's have a look at that whole element again. We have a certain measuring stick here. In the case of a standing opponent, it's going to be his ankle line. My hips don't want to go to the line, they want to go beyond the line. You must penetrate past that line. If I don't make the line, or if I stop on the line, your Ashigarami will always suffer as a result. So, we want to minimize surface area on the mat. We do that by rounding our spine. As we make contact with our opponent, we don't get a superficial or weak grip. We go through and snake the wrists all around our training partner's calf muscle. Most of the action comes from my legs pulling me along the mat. The hands mostly just hold my opponent's legs in place. It's my legs that pull me in. Once I penetrate sufficiently, we're in a position now to throw our 2 legs and catch so that his knee is well caught within my knee line. From here, with no hands, I've formed a connection where just my legs hold me in good position, and we're able to establish a good sense of control. Let's look at the same drill from a different angle. We start off in front of our training partner. From here, I need to go up to the ankle line. I make the initial contact, and then from here, my legs pull me in. Now, I fire my legs up, and you can clearly see his knee is well within my knee line. Even against resistance now, I'll be so close to my opponent's hips with my hips that even if he should move a few inches away from me in the course of live rolling, I'll be sufficiently close to get the break that I'm looking for. We're looking at the idea of distance and connection. We're trying to inculcate in you the idea that connection comes from our legs. It's my 2 legs binding up one of my opponent's legs that is the primary force of the connection. It's never the arms. The arms are always secondary to the legs. A great way to build this into you as students is the use of so-called gravity drills. These are simple drills which myself and my students use on an almost daily basis to work our way into the idea of using only our legs to form a solid connection to one of our opponent's legs. Let's start off with the primary connection drill and the primary gravity drill. Before we begin, let's talk a little bit about something I haven't touched on so far, but which is of the utmost importance for your development in the leg lock game. This is the notion of posture. One of the great things about the gravity drills is they force you to take on one of the most important body postures for leg lock development. This is the idea of a curved or rounded spinal posture. One of the most efficient means of moving human body weight ever devised is the simple and humble rocking chair. You can take even a very heavy person, set them in a rocking chair, and with a single finger you can move them for hours at a time with minimal effort. The effect of a rocking chair is one of moving human body weight effortlessly. If I configure my spine into the same shape as the bottom of a rocking chair, I too can move an opponent's body weight effortlessly. We're always looking to create that rocking chair shape effect, which enables us to move human body weight and to move ourselves into effective leg locking positions. Let's look at that same drill. We have a standing opponent in the same artificial square stance in front of us that we saw last time. Just like before, we're going to penetrate past our training partner's ankle line. Just like before, we're going to come up into an Arumi Ashigurami. But now we're going to practice the skill of releasing and coming up side to side. Every time we come up, just the hands come off and the legs lock on, so that we practice the skill of connecting and working against the force of gravity. Right now, the only thing holding me in place is my legs. Gravity is pulling me down, but my legs are maintaining my position. If there was any failure in the integrity of my Ashigurami, it would be revealed immediately by the force of gravity. If I don't have that rocking chair shaped spine, I'm going to come up short. Look how as I flatten my spine, I struggle to come up adequately. My legs get in the wrong position. But the moment I round my spine, I come up effortlessly into the move. You can tell that the movement is relatively effortless because my voice is not changing as I perform the movement. There's no real strain on my abdominal muscles because the curvature of my spine is what makes the effort so minimal. The moment my spine flattens out, I have to substitute abdominal muscle strength to throw my legs up, and you'll rapidly fatigue. Instead, use a rounded spine to come up effortlessly on your opponent. Work in large numbers of repetitions. You should be able to work for a considerable period of time. On the last one, with no hands, we just practice sitting our training partner down to the mat. When we come up, notice how my head always stays over his knee. A common mistake here is people will knock someone down and lose connection by not moving their head. If he goes down and my head doesn't move, the foot always comes out, one simple scoot, and I lose the knee line. It's very, very important that I build a mental habit that when he goes down, I go up, so that my head always stays close to his knee. Right now, there's a certain distance between his knee and my head. When he falls, I maintain that distance. So when he goes to scoot away on the fall, we're still connected. This is our first gravity drill. We're looking at gravity drills. These are the acid test in your development in the leg lock game as to whether or not you're using your legs to form a satisfactory connection to your opponent's legs. In addition, they reinforce one of the most important postural elements in the bottom leg lock game, the idea of a rounded spine in the same shape as the bottom of a rocking chair. It's this rounded spine which enables you to move your opponent's body weight from bottom position and will enable you to enter into your opponent's leg successfully. In the previous move, we used the gravity drill where we faced our opponent. Now let's do the exact opposite and face away. This gravity drill is a little more complex than the first, and it teaches a truly valuable skill, which we'll be looking at in some detail later on in the instructional. The skill of inverting our body and coming up onto the points of our shoulders to enter into our opponent's legs. We're going to start, as before, with our opponent in an artificial squared out position, just like so. Okay. Unlike the previous move, we're not going to face him, we're going to face the exact opposite direction. And unlike the previous move, we're not going to start in a seated position, we're going to start supine. One similarity is that we start with both hands on our opponent's legs, just like before. Okay. We're going to start an action of pulling our body up so that we get used to the idea of that rounded rocking chair shaped spine, which is so important to the bottom leg lock game. Once you become comfortable with the idea of a rounded spine, we're going to start splitting our legs so that one foot goes in the middle and one foot goes on the outside. As you become familiar with this motion, we're going to go the extra distance, and we're going to start taking the inside foot and hooking our shoelaces onto our training partner's hamstring just below the buttocks. This constitutes what we call an anchor on our training partner. As I come up and I fix the anchor, that enables me to pull my body weight using a combination of two hands and the anchor foot around behind my opponent. I need to take my outside leg and use that as a wedge around behind my opponent's body. You can see now that I'm not using my hands. The only thing connecting me and holding me up against the force of gravity is the use of my legs. My legs are scissoring. One leg is a pushing leg, pushing into my opponent's thigh. The other leg is a pulling leg, pulling against the calf muscle, forming a perfect wedge around my opponent. Now I take my outside foot and I put it on my training partner's hip so I can square back up to my training partner. Once again, I come up, this time on the other side, I put my shoelace in, that becomes my anchor foot. My outside leg comes out and around, and again we get that same scissoring effect. One leg is pushing into our opponent, the other is pulling back towards our own chest. I put my foot in and we learn to square up. In this way, we can go in side to side on our training partner and make a satisfactory connection with every single repetition. Once we feel familiar with this idea of holding our body comfortably here, now we add the idea of a breakdown. I take my knee and push it into my training partner's hip, and as always, I make sure that my head stays over my training partner's knee so that we have that strong sense of connection and don't lose it on the landing. Let's have a look at that same drill from another angle. Good. Now, we know that once we come in, we need to first create that gentle rocking chair effect, which is the hallmark and the basis of the entire drill. Once we're familiar with that, we get used to the idea of splitting my feet so that I have an inside foot and an outside foot. Then the inside foot becomes an anchor. I use that to pull my body around the corner and hook on. This leg here pushes into the thigh. This knee here pulls into the calf muscle. And as a result, with no hands, I resist the force of gravity and form a connection that keeps his knee well within my knee line. I use my feet to correct my body back to square. I come up, catch, and around the corner we go. My foot comes around, squares me up, and we just go side to side until when we put him down, we make sure our head stays directly over his knee to maintain the connection. We're looking at the notion of gravity drills, which do a number of very beneficial things for our leg lock development, the most important of which is the idea of working against gravity and using gravity as a test as to whether or not our legs are forming a satisfactory connection around our training partner's legs. Remember, we want to use our legs to form the connection so our hands are free to do the actual braking work, which we'll be looking at later on in the instructional series. Now, we're going to go into a rolling gravity drill, which brings in more movement than the drills we've seen so far. We're going to have a training partner stand more or less square to us, just like so. And we are going to, instead of facing square onto our training partner, we're going to face out at a 45-degree angle relative to our training partner, like so. From here, he's going to have his hands away from his hips, and then we're just going to practice going in wrist deep on our training partner's knee, just like so. Don't go in with your fingers, make sure you go in with the wrist. The first thing we want to make sure is that when we make the reach, we round out our spine in the manner we've been prescribing so far. Once our spine is rounded, we're in the perfect position now to go from a one grip into a double grip, just like so. From that double grip, I pull my legs up on that rounded spine, and just like before, I'm going to have an inside leg and an outside leg. Just like before, I'm going to hook my shoelaces onto my training partner's hamstring. Just like before, that anchor will enable me to pull my body around the corner and up into a position where I have scissored legs. One is pushing into the far thigh, one is pulling on the near calf muscle, and as a result, we can exert an outward force and keep our head over our training partner's knee so we form a good connection to complete the move. Unlike the previous drills, this will not be a repetition drill. It will be done simply as one for one. Let's have a look at it again from a different angle. Again, we'll have an opponent standing like so. We want to get away from a squared stance to one where we face 45 degrees across our training partner. We also want sufficient distance for our head to be able to move inside his feet. Now, that means we're going to have to lean forward to get that wrist-to-wrist contact. Once we make that contact, we go in and catch. Two hands on one leg. Our legs come up, they split, we form the anchor foot, and we come around the corner and lock onto our training partner. Now, with no hands, you're testing your connection against gravity. Now, we tilt our opponent to the outside, making sure that our head finishes over our training partner's knee so that we're in a good position to go on the attack. Demonstrating facing into the camera now. Again, we have an opponent in an artificial squared stance. We push our body off and we maintain a sufficient distance that my head can go inside my training partner's feet. That means I'm going to have to lean slightly forward to get wrist deep contact at the knee. I spin, turn, my legs come up, and we're in the perfect position now to sit our training partner down and end up in the perfect attacking position. We're looking at the idea of distance and connection, the second essential skill in the Ashigurami heel hooking game. Let's look now at a situation which is inevitably going to occur when you're training live with your training partners or competing. This is the idea of losing the knee versus knee line battle. We have a training partner sitting down in any kind of Arumi Ashigurami situation. We know that there's a clear line of demarcation. That line is my knee line, and the item I'm trying to contain within it is my opponent's knee. Your opponents know that, and inevitably, as you go to roll, there's going to be times that often as you roll back and forth and you're trying to apply the lock, your opponent's knee starts progressively moving further and further away from you. The further it moves away, the less effective you're becoming. Right about now, I've pretty much lost this. This is gone at this point. If I tried to apply a heel hook from here, it's going to be weak and feeble. So what we need are effective mechanisms to recover what we believe is a lost knee line. Okay, a very good one which we work with is an inside scoop, where I take my hand and I lock around my training partner's leg like so, and it forms a wedge underneath my training partner's knee. From here, my second hand catches, and when he goes to pull away from me, I put my feet on the floor and I use that scoop grip to draw my training partner back in. Then from here, I relock the Ashigurami. From this position, look how I turn my thumb down to facilitate withdrawing my leg, and now we've recovered the knee line and we're ready to go back into our training partner's heel. So we're going to do a simple drill where our training partner starts moving away from us and we feel we're losing the lock. Whenever we see that, we come forward and we scoop elbow deep around our training partner's knee. When he goes to pull away from us, it's a very easy thing to set my feet on the floor against his pull. And then from here, we win the tug of war because we have a very strong wedge behind our training partner's knee, and we're pushing with our feet, whereas he's merely pushing with his hands. And as a result, we can easily draw him well back inside the knee line, reassert the lock, turn the thumb down, limp the arm out, and now we're ready to play the game. This is one highly effective way to recover a lost knee line. Here's another method, also very effective. Same scenario. I start to lose the knee line. When I see I'm losing it, I follow with the head. Here's a common mistake. So many people, when they start to lose the knee line, don't move their head. And as a result, when they go to catch the legs, one good pull, and it's all gone. It's very important that my head tracks my opponent's knee, so that as I feel I'm losing the knee line, I go forward with the head. This time, I cup 2-on-1 on my training partner's leg like so. As my opponent goes to continue to pull away, I don't so much pull him to me as I pull myself to him. And then from here, the legs come back in place. Now, as he goes to move out, we've got a firmly established Ashigarami, and we're ready to go back in and enter the heel hook game. Once again, from an initial Arumi Ashigarami, my opponent goes to move away from me, I sit forward, and my head chases the knee. As a result, I'm in very good position to get this 2-on-1 grip. From here, I draw him in towards me, and at the same time, I pull my hips to him. And as a result, we can re-establish the knee line, and now we're in position to go into the heel hook. Similar things can be done in cross Ashigarami situations. From here, very often we'll have an opponent move away, and you feel you're losing the knee line. In these situations, as I feel I'm losing control of my opponent's knee line, here I have the ankle lace ashi, my opponent goes out to move, and I feel I'm losing my opponent's knee line, just like before, we punch in, we go elbow deep, and we grab our own thigh. Now I simply recline backwards, and as a result, my opponent is rapidly and easily dragged back in, and as a result, we can limp the arm out, and we've got excellent control of the knee line again. Once again, my opponent starts escaping what we call the primary leg. We'll be looking in more detail at this position later. But for now, we punch in, we go in elbow deep, and I grab my own thigh, putting an extra wedge inside my opponent's knee. Now, the simple action of reclining backwards drags him well back inside. And as a result, we're now in an excellent position to renew our attacks and get back to winning.